Has the pandemic taken the fun out of cruising forever? I'm Gary Bembridge, and in this episode of Tips for Travellers, I explore which of the changes that cruise lines have made to resume cruising right around the world are actually here to stay, and which changes will be dropped as the risks from the pandemic slowly eases. First of all, what changes will be staying longer term? Before the pandemic, many cruise lines actually allocated passengers different arrival times for check-in, often, of course, giving the earlier and more attractive times to those higher cabin categories like suites or perhaps high loyalty level travelers. Now, this was made to ensure the check-in and the boarding process was less crowded and much less frantic. Now, very few lines actually enforce them, so many cruisers, and I have to admit, including me, ignore the times and basically came to the port as early as we could, hoping to get on board as soon as possible. Designated and staggered arrival times will be absolutely essential for post-pandemic cruising, as lines do have to conduct much more intensive health screenings, which is going to make the whole check-in process much more time-consuming, basically forever. These designated arrival times will be much more strictly enforced going forwards. Now, on the plus side, many lines are starting to offer the chance to book your own check-in times, so we can then better align them with our travel plans, which of course was a concern from people previously. Before the pandemic, there was the very token tick box health questionnaire that no one really paid attention to on either side, passenger or cruise line. It relied on passengers self-certifying they were fit and well and had not been suffering from things like vomiting, diarrhea, that kind of stuff. Now, there is going to be new and enhanced self-completion questionnaires. These are still going to have to be completed. There's going to be temperature checks that have been added. But the really big change is there is now going to be some form of official medical certification. Now, currently, this is either undergoing a COVID-19 test in the cruise terminal or perhaps supplying a negative test from a cruise line approved clinic taken 72 to 48 hours before check-in. Now, which approach on the test depends on which country you're sailing from. But enhanced health screening with some form of medical certification will remain as part of the pre-boarding process, even as this pandemic subsides. Now, of course, the expectation is that testing may be replaced or supplemented by some form of vaccine certificate. Some of the lines, like the Norwegian group, for example, have already gone public and confirmed they are looking at the nuances of the legalities of requiring proof of vaccine for all passengers. Don't expect a return to only self-certifying questionnaires for health screening to get on a cruise in the future. Now, once you're on board, there is a fantastic change that has been made that I think we will all welcome staying. The safety muster drill has been reinvented and will stay reinvented. There's now a three-step process. First, you watch a safety briefing video on your cabin TV or the cruise line app. It ends normally with a unique code, and you call a special line to prove you've seen the whole video, so they know that because you've got the code. Then finally, what you have to do, you have around 2 hours to go to your designated muster station. You scan your cruise card there, and that proves that you know where to go in the case of an emergency. Now, this is definitely one change that will be staying, and it's a very welcome change too. I think it's actually going to make cruising more fun rather than less fun. Another change ramped up due to the pandemic and also here to stay is the use of technology, and specifically linked to your mobile phone or a wearable smart device that is unique to each cruise line. Cruise lines have absolutely turbocharged their apps to create a more touchless and much less paper-based cruise experience, and this will stay. So apps like Carnival's Hub, Royal Caribbean's Royal app, Viking's Viking Voyager, MSC Cruises MS for Me, and so on, you will now have to use to check in, to complete your health questionnaire, to pre-book and book excursions, dining, shows, spa treatments, make purchases, review your onboard account, and also you'll use that to access things that used to be printed and handed out. So things like the daily program you'll access on your app. You'll use QR codes to bring up menus in the restaurants, this kind of stuff. Now, of course, not only does the replacement of paper daily programs, accounts, menus, mean a more touchless experience, there's also a positive ongoing environmental benefit to this change because the cruise lines are going to be using less paper, less ink, creating less waste. So that's another positive change. Now, many of the lines are rolling out the wearable devices. They're sort of large coin-sized discs that you can wear as pendants, wristbands, and that kind of stuff. They include things like Princess Ocean Medallion, which actually other Carnival Corporation lines are adopting. MSC Cruises MSC For Me wristband, Virgin have their Voyager's band, Royal Caribbean have a new tracelet device. Now these smart devices, they can open your cabin door, you can access information around the ship on various interactive screens that check you in and off the ship. They also importantly act as a track and trace device, which helps identify which guests have been in contact with anyone testing positive. And this enables ships to potentially identify and only have to quarantine those guests and not entire ships if there is an outbreak. And we saw this actually happen recently when there was a scare on Quantum of the Seas in Singapore. These technology changes are here to stay for sure, and they will actually make it a more environmental, easier, smoother, touchless experience. Buffets have also been reimagined and are now served by the crew rather than being self-serve. And this change was underway already on some ships like, for example, Holland America. And it also looks to be a permanent change as it's seen to be more positive, a better public health option ongoing. So that's what's staying. What changes will be going as soon as the lines can phase them out? Ships will, of course, eventually return back to sailing at full capacity as and when the need for physical, social distancing diminishes and reduces. Now, depending on the region, ships are returning to service at between 50% and 70% capacity to enable the distancing required by the various government health authorities, and of course to ensure guests feel comfortable coming back on board by having more space and distancing. Now, having fewer guests on board as cruising returns means more space, less lines, more attention from the crew. So of course something that we can all enjoy while it lasts, as it of course will be going over time. As cruises resume, some venues like nightclubs and saunas in the spa, they're closed. They are restricted numbers in other venues like theatres, restaurants, bars, pools, kids clubs, the casino, and they've even scrapped some events like deck parties, for example. Now, as most ships return, you even have to book to attend many of the open venues and to go to various activities so they can control the numbers. Now, over time, all of this, of course, should change. Venues will all start to reopen again. The caps on numbers will go, and you'll be able to go back to being free, much more spontaneous, much less restricted about what you do. How soon? We don't know how this is going to be lifted, but of course, over time it will go. Many cruisers returning are limited to either their embarkation country residents only or groups of residents. So, for example, in Europe, Costa cruises were only for Italian residents. MSC cruises were for EU Schengen zone country residents only. The German lines like Mein Schiff and Hapag-Lloyd were open to Germans, Swiss and Austrians only. And in Singapore, Japan and Taiwan, only local residents could go on each of those respective cruises. Australia is being reported to be looking at Australian resident-only cruises, as is the UK initially. Over time, this change, of course, will also be scrapped as international travel opens and frees up with greater use of testing, vaccines, and as protocols get proven and tested. Now, in the United States, the CDC is requiring all cruises out of US ports to be no longer than 7 nights until at least November 2021. Also around the world, most cruises returning have been short, lasting a few days to a week. This has been largely a choice of the lines. Now, over time, cruising, of course, will almost certainly return to variable lengths, including those grand 3-month world cruises. The shorter cruise-only length will not be a change that endures. Just doesn't seem likely. I think much of 2021 looks like it's going to be shorter cruises, certainly out of the USA, but it is something that will change. To be able to call into many ports and to try and minimize the risk of bringing COVID onto the ship, the lines require passengers to do cruise line only excursions if they want to get off the ship in ports as cruises have restarted. No self-exploring is allowed at all. It's a really tightly controlled cruise line excursion or nothing. Now, this is largely an unpopular change, but it will have, the good news is, a limited life. How quickly it gets lifted will vary, I think, as countries and ports balance the public health risks and the economics, of course, of having guests out self-touring, drinking, eating, and shopping. but everybody's going to want this ultimately to be lifted. As cruising resumes compulsory mask wearing at embarkation, disembarkation, inside the ship we're not seated, eating and drinking, and when 6 feet physical distancing is not possible. Of course, once the mask advice changes by country health authorities, like, for example, the US and the EU CDCs, the requirement for compulsory wearing on ships will change in line with that. However, as we've seen in Asia, who've been through SARS and now COVID, I think we will see a lot of people choosing to wear masks on ships even when it's not compulsory any longer. But compulsory mask wearing at some point will go. There are some changes that it's too early to say if they will stay or go, so let's take a look at those. One great change for the crew out of the pandemic is the requirement in some regions to stop having crew sharing cabins. This, of course, has been easier with ships sailing at lower capacity, as some of the lines have been using things like inside and ocean view cabins to enable crew to have their own cabin, and then selling and placing passengers in balcony and higher grade cabins. It's unknown at this stage if the move to crew having their own cabins will be a permanent requirement and change in the industry. So something that we need to watch out for. The pandemic led to cruise lines introducing much more flexibility on changing and cancelling cruises, even at really short notice in some cases. They also cut the time before paying final balances to 60 or even 30 days, depending on the line before a cruise. Now, many of the travel industry people that I have followed believe across travel, greater flexibility is here to stay. I am skeptical, but this is an area to watch. I do hope that this increased flexibility will be a change that stays, but we just don't know. I hope you found this interesting and helpful. I have hundreds and hundreds more Tips for Travellers episodes full of cruising advice and tips. So why not enjoy another one right now?